the detail. And but before we begin, let's first see the idea behind this extension. So essentially, agile practice is quite common to most of you, and you most likely will find a lot of documentation out there from the developer's perspective. And what's different about the BTS's approach is that it also gives the business leader's perspective. And our interest is how the business needs are captured, developed into solutions, and the business value, essentially. And therefore, in the BTS, the flow extends in both directions. So you can see that you will, later on, I will go into details more about what that means. And there's essentially a comprehensive focus on demand planning and business design, as well as development and rollout of the business changes. So that's what it means by extending on both directions. And the idea of the standard is to be flexible and adaptable to the existing Agile framework. So SAFe is one of the most commonly implemented Agile framework. We've also enhanced the BTS approach, addressing wide compatibility with SAFe, essentially. And so most of you here would already know the BT standard, hopefully. By enhancing the BTS framework with this comprehensive Agile approach, we enable faster time to value and accelerated development with effective governance. But why is that needed? In today's business, where speed is king, data is fuel, and co-creation is the key, we are looking at disruptions from all corners. And so there's a need for a robust operating model to be more sustainable. So let's look at, for example, in this image, you can see how AI can significantly reduce the time required for development cycles. So from planning to running the solution in production, enhancing efficiency, and possibly reducing cost and time to market. So the evolution of end-to-end development methods has seen a shift towards a more integrated and efficient model. In the traditional model at the bottom, where you can see here, let me just help here. In the traditional model there, we had distinct phases, and for example, business design, development, operations, or run, each handled by different teams. This model often resulted in longer time to value, sometimes up to 6 months, due to the handovers and lack of integration between the teams. And the introduction of DevOps, as you can see here in the middle part, helped to reduce the time to value by integrating the build and the run phases. And this approach brought the development and operations teams together, making the process more efficient and reducing the time to value to around 3 months. However, the business needs were still somewhat isolated here and from the DevOps process. And even though they were involved in steering and contributing to it, they are not really integrated into the same team or the same idea. So the latest evolution in this process aims to bring essentially the business needs even closer to the development process. And this involves making the quarterly planning more efficient, making the business needs more concrete and focused on real value and benefits. So this approach aims to further reduce the time to value and ensure that the development process is closely aligned with the business objectives. So in essence, the goal is to create a seamless, efficient, and value-focused development process that integrates business needs, development, and operations. And if we look into the idea of this, for many of you, Agile principles are, like I said, probably already familiar, and then so we maintain in this approach 2 key principles. First, the embracing the development, incremental development, which essentially incorporates the feedback loop after each sprint, allowing for continuous improvement based on user response and so on. The approach ensures that each release is followed by valuable feedback, forming a foundation for essentially enhancements and so on. The second thing that we will adhere to are, of course, maintaining roadmaps and backlogs. So here. And this will provide clear visibility and task and priorities to all stakeholders involved. So having said that, let's go and see what that includes. So into the end-to-end development flow, DevOps flow, and let's see what that means. But first, let me go through the terminology with you. So the concepts used in this framework essentially draws a lot of inspiration from the scaled Agile framework, SAFe, but with certain modifications for simplicity and broader application. So for example, we use the term such as Agile release train and product increments planning, which are essentially integral part of SAFe and include large-scale structures like epics, features, and user stories. So those are quite familiar to you guys, hopefully. But in contrast to SAFe-specific terminology, we essentially adopt a more straightforward language for example, let's say portfolio. In our context, it's used as in its standard form, and it essentially, we want to keep it lean, of course, but not necessarily adopting the full SAFe approach. Our interpretation of value streams extends beyond the SAFe's interpretation, so it's tailored to align with business and technological growth objectives. We typically segment the enterprise or organization to from 5 to 8 value streams to better represent this perspective. Then additionally, we have introduced the concepts of planning collectives, which is not actually a term found in SAFe. These collectives are important in shaping the business design before we incorporate demands into the PI planning processes. They also ensure a more comprehensive strategy beyond the scope that SAFe is establishing for the technological practices. So these are key terminologies that I'd like to raise before we move on, and they form the basis of a unique, basically the unique adaptation of this Agile methodology that BTS has. All right, so what do we mean by all of this? So BTS focuses on business value creation and value delivery, essentially. And to do that, we emphasize the roles and what the roles do in the end-to-end flow. So we look closely at their relationship to each other and to certain artifacts. And artifacts are hopefully familiar to you, but these are deliverables that are used to essentially progress something inside this flow. So in this illustration, you can see the business value is created through 3 artifacts: the portfolio, the roadmap, and the backlog. And these are what we refer to as those deliverables or tangible artifacts of value. So each of these artifacts are handled by different roles. So for example, the team backlog is managed by the product owner. Here we have the product owner. The product owner manages the team backlog, and he or she is supported by the Scrum Master and the commitment of the Agile team, essentially. The team aims to develop and release work items from the backlog, and the prioritization of stories within the team backlog is essentially the primary goal of the planning process. So these initiatives originate from what we refer to as the product roadmap, and that is overseen by the product owner. And that follows the broader business development roadmap established by the planning collective. So there you can see how they are linked together. The planning collective is made up of business people. And they are responsible for business design and crafting the business development roadmap. And the roadmap guides the product owner in managing their own specific product roadmap. And for simplicity, only one of these, one integrated roadmap is shown here, but you can have several of those. So essentially, to recognize that the process involves a team backlog and a roadmap, and sometimes portfolio approval is necessary for investment decisions. So these are quite key components in the Agile framework that we're talking about, and it's quite fundamental from the business leader's perspective regarding development activities. And note that in each of these slides, you will see that we are pretty much focusing on the business leader's perspective. And when I was talking about extending both directions, here's a good illustration to show how we extend Agile planning and the development scope in both directions. So the business capability owner, such as a global business process owner or a functional leader, they do the business design with the help of a business analyst and technology people. For example, those could be enterprise architects, security, service owners, data owners, and so on. They are accountable for the design part, which leads to the creation of business development roadmap. And from this roadmap, the development needs are identified, forming epics here. And that's how it goes through the flow. These epics pass through product and planning stages to the portfolio as development request. And once prioritized and approved by the PI planning, they are broken down into features and into stories. That side, yes. So this cycle from the portfolio to team backlog constitute the entirety of the PI planning, essentially, PI planning process, which you will see in a different illustration. Then after that, the development takes place. So you can have development, you would release and you operate, and then it's ready for business value realization and rollout. So that's how essentially we consider the end-to-end. So extending from the business planning design into all the rollouts and so on. And here you can see how this can be scalable. To increase the solution delivery capability, solution teams can be multiplied and shared critical resources leveraged at the domain level, and the platform operations are essentially consolidated across teams. So in practice, for example, when utilizing platforms like ServiceNow, Salesforce, or SAP for various business solutions, multiple Agile teams may work concurrently on the same platform, and coordination across these teams is essential for effective technology management. So this will create a sort of matrix like structure where technology management is executed across different teams using the same underlying technology. So while also we ensure that the Agile team remains closely aligned with the specific business needs. And you can see here how this is essentially scaled. And this is also where the Agile release trains come in place. If you're using SAFe, or from SAFe point of view, you can compare with that. And talking about value, in this slide, I can elaborate more on the importance of value perspective. So while many Agile frameworks like SAFe includes portfolios and epics, they do not adequately track how an epic contributes to creating business value. And the follow-up and measurement of business value realization usually occur at the feature and story level. So while this is very good for essentially tracking development efficiency, it is lacking a robust mechanism to actually monitor the actual realization of business value. So from business leader perspective, what they're looking at is in this level, essentially. and the measurements are done in this level. So therefore, they don't have enough visibility. So here we introduce a concept of epic readiness report that and along with the epic demo and the value report, this provides the business leaders with clear insights into what was requested, what has been delivered, and the value derived from the epic itself, which is also information crucial for, by the way, evaluating the success and the learnings from the development process. So you can see that the workflow, the whole workflow then essentially culminates to the value report. And this is created after the rollout and training phases. And this report evaluates whether the business value has been realized or not, or as expected. I can see we have something in the chat, Lotta. Just at this point, is there anything, questions from audience or?
Actually, just a question related to the material. So both this recording as well as this extension material can be found under managept.org for those of you who were not yet at this session when we were viewing how to locate those there.
Awesome, thank you. So let's move on. Then we're talking about the minimum viable governance. So in the BTS, minimum viable governance is a terminology we use how to essentially make sure that there's no heavy control over the whole framework, but there is adequate essentially governance and very efficient one. So here, here's how it goes with the minimum viable governance in this case. So value streams, they manage the portfolio at their level, and they handle specific initiatives and issues there. For broader concerns requiring a higher level of oversight, that goes to the higher level, essentially the enterprise level. And that would be, for example, enterprise architecture, data security, technology management, and so on. Those will be escalated to the enterprise level. That's where the coordination of these, essentially, we're calling it like overarching elements, is managed. And this ensures the alignment of the governance across the whole organization. So value streams, there could be more than one value. So one value stream in an organization, like I mentioned earlier, 5 to 8 value streams is what we're aiming for here. And you may, in some organizations, that may happen. And if there's some conflict with resources and that level, then they need to escalate to the enterprise levels. And the main objective is to empower the end-to-end flow for value creation, and that allows the teams to operate autonomously and efficiently. They only need to escalate issues when additional resources or decisions regarding architecture, data governance, or similar needs arise. And these escalations are not burdensome. So the value streams level actually provide close support to the end-to-end teams and flows. So here you can see the end-to-end level, and here's the value stream level. And these guys, essentially in the gray box there, they are together. The value stream will mandate the end-to-end level flows, and they support them very closely. So unless everything is handled within this box, or if they cannot handle something within this level, then they would escalate, and only then. So this gives us a little bit flexibility, essentially. It sort of balances out the agile and control, and enables a more unified operation. All right, so if we look at another view for the business perspective, here we can see how we can illustrate that better. So it's often observed that the development teams require all demands to be processed through PI planning. From a business point of view, that's a bit excessive. So if you, for example, they, for example, need an existing reporting system, and if you have that existing reporting system and you just need a new report, waiting a full quarter for that through the PI planning would be quite excessive. So if the task can be completed in a few hours or a day, it's better to go through their own sort of like customized approach or flow. So the governance model acknowledges that there are difference between small and big initiatives. And so this can be quickly addressed if there's a small one, smaller demands, and the larger, more complex ones may be, for example, multiple quarters, they can be going through a different approach. So here you can see that small change functionality or functionality change. You can see that there's a business analyst understanding that, then it will go into the team backlog, prioritized by the product owner, and then it will be developed and released on a certain time. And then here you can see if there's a functional change, new features, the same thing goes, but this will go through the PI planning. And similar to the new functionalities, and this is the epic or feature level, they will go through also the business, the product roadmap, and then the portfolio management, PI planning, and so on. And here, if we have new solutions, this is even more complicated. So the business will know that, okay, I'm expecting it to go through, of course, business design, the business development roadmap, and so on and so forth. So this BTS is very good at understanding these approaches. Do we have something, Lotta, from the chat?
We have a couple of questions, yes. And first one is solution architect involved to the end-to-end flow level? And then I was thinking that we can test here in a live situation how well our chat BTS works. So I will post the answer to this question, and then we can discuss it whether you agree with the chat BTS or not.
Okay, and by the way, while Lotta is doing that, just for your information, the chat BTS has well gotten an upgrade to reflect better this Agile framework as well that we are releasing this month or today.
Yes, so actually it seems to be so that you might not, Elena, see the answer
Okay,
there. Yes, so I will say that according to the chat BTS, the solution architect is involved in the end-to-end flow level and plays a crucial role in developing and maintaining the technical vision of a specific solution, ensuring it aligns with architectural guidelines. They are also responsible for the analysis, design, planning, and implementation of the technology, applications, and information required to execute the business architecture and processes, which are then part of the overall solution.
Sounds like a solid answer.
Comment this one in any way, Elena.
Yeah, so it sounds like a solid answer, and that's indeed is the case. If you have a solution, the solution architect is very important in understanding what exists and what needs to be, what can be done for the existing solutions. So solution architect's job is mainly related to the existing solutions. And if we have let's say the difference with the enterprise architect is someone that focuses on new solutions or new stuff that goes into the organization, innovation, all that type of things. And then of course we may also have someone called a data architect, and they are more concerned with the data structure and so on. But yes, that was a good answer, Lotta. So
yeah,
if you find,
and
if
there was another. Yeah, there was another question still related to how to ensure the architecture is updated in the Agile flows. And this one I also wanted to try with the chat BTS, and the answer is quite extensive. But in brief, ensuring that the architecture is updated within Agile flows is critical, and it's about maintaining the relevance and effectiveness of the enterprise architecture, and some practices based on the business technology standard for ensuring this is, for example, continuous collaboration and maintaining an architectural backlog, regularly refining and prioritizing the architectural backlog, and then, for example, ensuring sufficient feedback loops. But the list is quite extensive. It provides 10 different steps for ensuring architecture is updated in the Agile flows.
Yeah, and that's actually pretty good to know, because it is quite complicated how that is done, and many organizations are doing it differently. So it's possible, for example, that if you do some service planning, that's also a part of updating as well stuff into your architecture and design, depending on what you're focusing on, and like the bot is mentioning, a lot of feedback loops and so on. But that's a little bit more, I think, complicated to answer, like it's already demonstrated there. So perhaps that's something that you could look into more in another time.
Yes, we have 2 other questions in the chat, but maybe, Elena, we take those once you have proceeded a bit, so that we don't run out of time.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Lotta. And let's finish up this. And if there's anything related to the graphics or the illustrations that we're putting out here, that would be probably good to address while the picture is up. All right, so if we continue, I'm going to show you now essentially the main picture. So this illustration represents a very comprehensive view of how these various elements that we've been talking about interact in the Agile development process. And if we start with the development and operation loops, those are here. That is essentially the core of this Agile illustration. So they emphasize the importance of ongoing development, support for the products, especially those with the larger user base. So it's unrealistic for small teams. Of course, you know what they're doing, they're developing and operating, but also it's talking about how they would support their development. It's quite unreasonable for smaller teams to be able to provide global support, for example. So professional management is often necessary for it to become a consumable product or service. So here we're talking about when an Agile team develops, they actually release as well quite often. And if they have something called a releasable solution, it's not yet something that can be consumed by end users, because before they're having adequate support and integration and so on, after that it becomes a consumable service. Then let's see the governance elements. So these includes the tools like the Epic readiness report, Epic demo, value report. These elements ensure that at each stage of the development actually aligns with the business objectives. Like we already spoke earlier. So here you can see the Epic readiness report, the Epic demo, value report. These are those type of elements that will ensure value are also aligned with the business needs. And then we have behind this picture is a canvas. And the canvas represents essentially the development process, starting from the demand, then generation of demand on the left here, and then you move towards the development and to the rollout, release, and service operations and support. So let me just pick up the canvas. Here you can see it's grayed out, these gray boxes. So you have here the demand, then you have the development area up here, and then you can see these namings here: rollout, service release, service ops, and so on. So those are the different areas behind the picture that we call the canvas. And up here you can also see the end-to-end governance, which is essentially about elements including strategic planning, for example. I need my mouse back. Strategic planning, enterprise architecture, portfolio management, data governance. You can see those here. Security management, technology management, and so on. Technology management, service governance is where the service life cycle is included, and they are actually giving input to the PI planning as well and contribute to the feature backlogs with enablers. So from here, you can see, you go down, you see here 2 things. There's enabler and there's feature. Features are those new items that are coming from the business, and enablers are items that are coming from the technology management service governance to ensure that initiatives that will help maintain and keep the technology sustainable are also developed in the same way. So they are inputted through PI planning into the features. So those needs are not necessarily coming directly from business, like I mentioned. Then we have business requests and backlogs. Business needs are essentially articulated through epics, which are approved at the portfolio level and then detailed in the PI planning into features and stories. So they're created there. And these stories are then entered to the team backlog and they're ready for development and release. Then we have the Agile team roles, of course, in this picture as well. So product owners, Agile release trains, they are quite important in facilitating this whole process and make sure that the epics and features are effectively translated into actionable backlog items. Then we have the traditional BTS elements, which are the 4 types of demands. The capability planning, ideas and concept, increments and improvements, service changes. These are the 4 different types of demands that are essentially different in nature, depending on what they are. They are processed differently in the Agile framework. So they either go directly to PI planning or into the team backlog. So what we're trying to illustrate here is to provide like a clear understanding of how the different elements are processed and how they work together in the Agile framework from the initial demand into the final product. All right, so with that, let me just again find my screen. Then I mentioned the screen, the illustration earlier, where you see generative AI is accelerating the development and so on. Here I have an example about how generative AI accelerates the time to value, and it's on top of the framework for a reason. So here we have, for example, during the demand phase, we can have generative AI assisted and experimented based on business design. So here we have created something, for example, you can have a consolidation for features and epics, how business is essentially guided to create those different epics in order for it to be more efficiently inputted to the development flow. And PI planning is more understandable, everyone will have consistency and so on. Here we have an example of smarter and faster PI planning, how that is done. You can use generative AI to create scripts. You can also have solutions to essentially create text-to-script functionality. You can use them for testing, and then of course you can generate training and communication materials and so on. And there are user-centric options as well. So these are some examples on how that actually happens already now in these scenarios. Right, and then I'd like to go quickly through the bigger picture with you. So give you some sort of idea about the granularity that happens within those flows. So here's another view of the end-to-end flow with the capabilities from start to finish. So we're talking about here the plan, build, and run phases and how Agile development goes through them. But here we have actually 2 flows, both the sequential development and Agile development into one. So the strength of business technology standard is not just in having a very concise and unified model, but it can also be very adaptable. So in the business organizations nowadays, they're not essentially traditional software developers, so they don't go with just one thing fits all, but they often have different development needs and so on. And so the BTS actually supports this diversity quite well. If we look into the
may I ask, Elena, before you proceed, how does the Agile framework address gate approvals and governance in general? Are there still some gates, or how is it kind of taken into consideration, these governance questions?
That's a very good question, Lotta. If I go back to this picture here, I can show you actually that in the BTS model, we have introduced something called approval points. And approval points are, there are 6 different approval points. For example, you authorize the flow, which is the first one. So the value stream will authorize the end-to-end flow. You approve development initiative, approve development request, approve development, and so on and so forth. These approval points actually align both the, if you have a project, these are also aligned with the project gates, if necessary. Not to all gates, but to the ones that the value stream is essentially has a say on. And then this is now, as you can see, also aligned with the Agile framework. So there are certain points that needs approval and so on. And with these approval points, you're able to see how the things are progressing also in the Agile framework. Hope that answers your question, Lotta.
Yes, thank you, Elena.
Good one, thank you. Very good. And so if I now show you what these are, just to magnify and quickly show you what they are, what that looks like inside. So here we can see that the BT standard emphasizes the importance of early phase development, and it offers quite extensive material and practices for developing business needs and requirements before reaching the PI planning stage. And the early stage is where essentially the business needs and requirements are developed and is seen quite crucial in the business technology. Here you can see that there's a capability planning initiative, and there are ideas and concept initiatives. They both go through certain processes. You go through the business rationale. This is continuous insight planning. So you would create a business development roadmap and then come up with the development initiatives, which then inputs to the portfolio as needed. And then here it's quite important also to mention that you have outside-in perspective and inside-out perspective, both of them, using the user journey design and procedural design, for example. Enterprise architecture is done at this phase. And here, when I showed the AI, this is also where generative AI can help actually in these processes. And so this is the plan process, as you can see. The planning collective is actually quite prominent here. The planning collectives and the value stream, they are key role in this early phase, and they take the primary responsibility for shaping and guiding the development of the business requirements. And this approach differentiates the BT standard a little bit from the SAFe, and highlighting essentially the magic that happens in the early stages of the planning of the development, which is thoroughly addressed here in the BT standard, and I believe not so much addressed in the SAFe. And then you can see that the project and Agile integration is here. The topmost track represents essentially the project here, and it can effectively utilize the PI planning. So regardless if you have business case, project plan, or business case epic, you can go through the portfolio increment. You can also go through the PI planning together, and this allows the unified developments essentially to be, let's say, prioritized together. So most often you use the same resources, so it's very, let's say, cumbersome or very troublesome for most organizations to think about how to do this. But here in BTS, the solution is essentially handling them this way. So they can coexist, and the benefit from the same planning processes is actually quite good. And Agile teams can implement projects, and then they bridge traditional project management with Agile methodologies. And then the last image here is showing the last bit, so the run part. And it shows the overlap from the previous picture, actually. So you can see this is the ops loop that we're focusing here. And you can see that how there's a differentiation between the releasable solutions and the consumable service as well. This is now magnified bigger, so you can see the point that I was talking about earlier. So we maintain the thinking that once a development is done, it is a releasable solution. However, it needs to go through things like service integration, planning support, and service operational readiness before it can be consumable service. So that's regardless of the product focused thinking, solutions, or platform, the concept is still the same. All right, and I believe this would be my last slide, Lotta. So this is now the roles and detailed planning. So here we also provide the different key roles that would be essential for the whole end-to-end flow, essentially. So they are defined in more detailed aspects about how to do the demand planning and planning aspects and so on. So how to do the implementation and also how the stages, how to run these different items or development, essentially. Okay. So
Good.
That was just a short highlights of different slides, Lotta. So we can take some more questions now if needed.
Yes, there were a couple of questions still in the chat. So while the PT standard itself doesn't take a stance related to the future of DevOps, but there was a question that do we have DevOps raising or losing its stream in coming years? Would you like to share any predictions? What do you think, Elena?
Sorry, do we have a what?
DevOps raising or losing its stream in coming years. So I'm translating will it become more or less popular or essential?
Yeah. Well, that's actually a very difficult question to answer because DevOps is in essence just development, let's say, way of working. So that is very, very subjective to organization, whether or not that's their need to do it. I mean, there is always a pro and cons to any of these approaches. So I don't want to predict anything, but at the current moment, DevOps is still quite in that sense.
Yeah. And maybe if you stop the share, Elena, I might, there was another question yet related to how to distinguish small changes from functional changes, and business would often want everything to seem like something small, whereas IT might then see them as something bigger. And I will share from here. So now I'm back at managept.org, and here, when I was asking the chat BTS guide to assess whether a change is small or, sorry, can you still hear? Get an alert that
yeah, but we didn't see anything, but now
stopped.
we can also see something.
You can or you can't?
Can, yeah, now we can see something.
Okay.
You're chopping off a bit. And now we lost Lotta. Now you're back. And muted.
My Zoom unexpectedly rebooted itself, so apologies for that. Let's go back here. So in the context of the business technology standard, there are some approaches for making the distinction. So there is assessing the impact and the change magnitude, the development effort, or the service change flow, or based on the user acceptance testing, or then documentation. So here are some guidelines as to how to assess the magnitude of that change. Would you like to highlight anything related to that, Elena? Well,
actually, what I would say is it always depends on there are two things here in play. So how you actually set up the teams that are developing, whether you have like a continuous development team or something that is ad hoc. So if you have a continuous development team, there's always a risk if there's no proper operating model that the business will always be able to get something from that team faster. So regardless of the size of their initiative, whether it's a small change or something, they might put that in very easily. So my advice is to actually have proper differentiation of the demand. So demand planning is very important, and make sure that they understand that what are the criteria to move forward to the development flow and how to do that. So once that is clear, it's a little bit easier for the business to also understand what is. But of course, in the end, the other point I was going to make is that it's always a business decision whether or not something is big or small or is important. Rather, even if it's a small thing, but it has a big business impact, that's something that IT needs to comply to.
What you said, I wanted to link back to the operating model that's in the picture here. So here we also have an illustration of the different sources of demand, and then you were referring to those.
Yeah, and I was referring particularly to the small changes there, the increments and improvements, and as well as
increments and improvements. Yes. And then maybe on a final note that if this is a topic that is close to your heart and that you would like to master, then in April there are the practitioner and development designer courses available, and those are really recommended for people who want to learn how to combine the sprint-based agile practices with the gate-based governance principles that we were discussing, for example, here as well. So this is an opportunity in April that we have to offer.
Yeah, and Lotte, just a reminder that we also updated the roles deck. So if you go to the extension, you can see overview from the hamburger, the extension slide, then page.
BT standard extensions here, and here are the roles.
Yeah, and that's actually giving you an overview of the new role deck already. So that's something that will be interesting. What we have essentially, that would be good, Lotte, if you can do that. That what we have highlighted here in the different roles, if you go to the middle somewhere and go to a role card, we can see how the different elements, as you can see here, the different artifacts are now there, and what are the responsibilities of the different roles inside that artifact, and how to produce value through the certain artifacts. So that's an update that has been done here to essentially align these different models.
Yes. And then it seems that we still had one final question. Where your core systems are outsourced and there is minimal in-house development, how practical is adoption of DevOps? So in the cases when the core systems are outsourced and there is only minimal in-house development, is it practical, or how practical is the adoption of DevOps?
Right. So they're like always, like in every situation where you have in-house and outsourced personas or personnels, you need to make sure that the correct roles are in-house, and most of the time you can have outsourced. And this is a larger question. Like, so normally you would want your teams or your extended teams to be able to use your operating model, whatever you have implemented. If the organization has implemented SAFe or DevOps, then naturally DevOps will be adopted. If you have most of the time those guys, it's not a question about whether or not to do it, but it's a question about your strategy, whether or not you need to have efficient teams doing your development. Or do you need, is it enough to have, like, let's say, some agile practices and let the teams do it? So it's very much up to the organization and what your strategies are. But I would say that if you have outsourced teams, then it's very important to make sure that you have also, which role should be in-house. For example, the product owner and so on is important to have in-house. I don't know if that answers the question, but if you have anything else, don't hesitate to email us at info@btforum.org.
Yes. So welcome to be in contact with us. And with that note, we conclude this Wednesday webinar. Thank you so much, Elena. And thanks to all the dozens and dozens of people online today. And this recording, even though interrupted in the middle, will be also shared on managebt.org. Have a nice continuation for the day.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.